Okay, so I'm going to introduce our speakers tonight, Uthra and Nikita, Uthra Rajgopal and Nikita Gill. Uthra is an independent curator who has worked with the Whitworth and the V&A. She has developed a specialist interest in fiber arts and South Asian textiles. In 2019, Uthra received the Art Fund New Collecting Award to build a collection of artworks connecting South Asia and the diaspora in England. She's also our guest curator at the Members Show, which is on currently at Block Project. So I feel like Uthra and I are suddenly like colleagues at Block at the moment. So welcome, Uthra. And Nikita Gill is an artist, practitioner, and curator in training with the International Institute of Visual Arts, and so INIVA, and Manchester Art Gallery. And Nikita has also just been appointed curator at the Manchester Art Gallery, so congratulations. Currently, Nikita is working on Future Collect, supporting Jade Montserrat's commission by INIVA. Nikita is a recipient of the 2021 UK New Artists Future Producers Grant and is a joint creative producer for Proformer Desire Lines. And Nikita is a member of the Black Curators Collective. So just to give a little framework of tonight's conversation, it's going to be split into two halves. So we're going to have about 40 minutes, 35 to 40 minutes, and then a 10-minute break. And then we'll have another 35 minutes to 40 minutes in the second half. And I guess maybe I can just kind of briefly talk about what Uthra, me, and Nikita discussed in our preliminary chat, because there were so many different things. And there was just kind of like a preparation chat to get to know each other. We talked about the significance of creativity in the context of what Arts Council England envisions, which they say specifically is a creative and cultural country. That's one of their stated outcomes. And one of the questions that we raised between us was whose creativity ends up being front and center and whose fall on the wayside. And we also talked about the treatment of artists and of participants in commissions and projects that seek to engage people. So, but what are the terms of these engagements and who ultimately benefits most from these engagements? But above all, I think all three of us were most interested in thinking about care and an arts organization's capacity to care. This on a more kind of on Block's level, we've been thinking a lot about care in the last year, explicitly to explore what it means to be an organization that cares, and what critical care means in these times of crisis and urgency. But I think sort of like just plotting these coordinates is a way maybe of entering into the conversation. So I'll hand it over to Uthra and to Nikita, and thank you.
Thank you, Sunshine, and thank you to everyone who's joined this evening. It's a pleasure to know that you're here by your name on your screen because I can't see you at the moment. But hello and welcome. So yeah, Nikita and I we're thinking about the Arts Council England strategy, which many of you will know was a 10-year plan that was launched last year to set the path ahead for how the Arts Council England, which is one of the largest organisations in the UK that provides funding for the creative arts, is looking to implement its funding and where it wants to invest. So as Sunshine was saying, we looked at the outcomes that they have talked about, the outcomes that are the creative people, cultural communities, and a creative and cultural country. So this is what the Arts Council England are envisioning in their 10-year strategy. And so Nikita and I started to think about this word creativity and what it actually meant. And so I think that's a good place for us to start our conversation. So Nikita, would you like to jump in and share your thoughts on where you think and experience and view the word creativity and what it means to you?
Yeah, so hello everybody and welcome, and my name is Nikita. Um I think that it has been quite difficult to understand what creativity means in this particular period of time, where language is changing so rapidly that artist as a word seems to be falling out of favor in place of creatives, if that makes sense. And am I a creative as an amalgamation of being a curator and an artist? Is that the blending of the two things? Um, and also, what value does that creativity have? I feel uh, very concerned about my value in this particular industry, I would say, and what decides that, you know?
Yeah, there's definitely a noticeable shift away from the word artist to this word and term creativity. And I thought it might be useful for us to kind of discuss a little bit about our experiences working on curatorial projects and our sort of creative capacities and how that's been valued or not valued. So one of the recent experiences I had involved a funded exhibition, and it was specifically focusing on women from a certain community. And whilst they were sort of celebrated as cultural producers rather than as end users, there was no follow-up. And after the exhibition ended, these artists who were valued as cultural producers, creative producers, fell off the radar very quickly. And so the person who was in receipt of the funding ended up championing a cause that didn't have that didn't necessarily involve a collective voice or an experience every step of the way. It was at certain key points, which I felt was pinned onto the elements of the funding and the structure as it was set out. That's just one small example, but I know there are lots of others. Is there any that you'd like to share, Nikita?
Yeah, I would say for me, in terms of I guess the capital that you gain and lose in the process of a project happening or a program happening or funding being given, um, it is quite interesting from a, I'm going to say younger person's perspective, of the skills that I have gained naturally of using digital means of communication, and the value that that has now as opposed to the value it had um, prior to us not being able to contact each other in any other way. um, it was sneered at, and um, support was not given to help to cultivate that um, interest in the digital at the time. Now that has changed because there is no other way to do that, and I think it's quite interesting because the report, that, you know, the strategy, by its very nature, starting with what are the outcomes, everyone's going to look at that and or read that or hear it, and they're going to be like, okay, this is our end goal. We need to create creative people, you know, we need to build communities. And it's like, well, no, those communities already exist. And what should be happening is thinking about, how have we failed those communities in the past, and how can we better support them in the future?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, you know, when you talk about support for digital strategies and the amount of support that young people offer to people in a hierarchical structure in an institution is invaluable, but somehow you still feel like you might be at the bottom of a pyramid, and that your skills that were once sidelined, because a lot of social people who are into social media will, you know, you hear comments like, oh, please concentrate for more than 10 seconds, or, you know, it's not just these 1 second images you're going to be looking at. It's those sorts of comments that you might hear in just on the media, really. And so I think those skills that you've highlighted, and also from my own point of view in terms of you know, my ethnicity, my background, my cultural background, all of a sudden I feel like we've become hyper visible and we've always been here, right? So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that hyper visibility, and how you have how you've found the experience of that in light of your recent posts and traineeship.
I have felt hyper visible to the point of being de-skinned. Unfortunately, I feel raw and vulnerable because everyone sees the skin and wants to peel it. They want to get under the layers so that they can benefit from the learning that might be there from my lived experience. Sorry to have used such traumatic language, but that's exactly how it feels, you know, especially when you sort of, you come into this industry in such a difficult way. You have to volunteer a lot, you have to work a lot. It's a passion thing as well as being a career. So therefore, there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into it. And to be vulnerable to everything that you were vulnerable to before, but then also now the toxic side of, we are itching to help you, we're itching to include you, we desperately want to save you from yourself and from this space, so that we can say that we saved you from yourself and of this space, you know?
Yeah, I completely hear that. And I think your description, your very vivid description, um, it can feel like you're having to kind of explain and justify your presence, and why you've chosen the career path that you've had. And I know that you know, in my experiences, when I've championed and still and continue to champion aspects of South Asian contemporary art, it's like, oh well, you know, the whole point of it is that you embed it into mainstream programming and exhibitions, right? It's not about, well, thanks, Uthra, but off you go and find an audience that's more receptive to that. It's about opening up a wider range of audiences. And I think I've struggled with this, or I've been skeptical about this when I've seen on job applications diversity and inclusivity, because at the back of your mind you think this is a tick box exercise. I'm going to be called for interview because of my name. And you know, they're doing their duty, fulfilling criteria. And it's something that you know, if you were not seen as part of you know, the mainstream, it's something that would automatically come to a person's mind. And you know, that isn't harsh, that's just the reality of how we've experienced life in this country, I think.
Definitely. And I think one of the real interesting questions that will hopefully stay with people after part 1 and part 2 of this conversation is, you know, how can in the context of the global majority, can that pain be alleviated, or how can that pain be safeguarded against when doing something as simple as applying for something that you know you're good at, or doing the job that you knew that you had the skills to do? Because with, I can't speak for everybody, I can only speak for myself, but with every job interview, with every application that comes up, there's questions of identity. What identity will I be in this application? Who will I be in this application? Who will I be in this interview? What parts of my identity will I kind of share in order to prove that I am what they need?
Yeah, I think one of the most surprising things I experienced when coming into the art sector, from because I changed careers, I had a legal background. I felt that the art sector would be, you know, quite open in the way that they approach people, and you know, with in the sense that well, they'd have more creative strategies, quite frankly, in the way that in the way they engage with people. And it was very it was very much not the case in my experience. It felt like quite quite difficult at times, and it felt that you were having to explain things about how you know, why it is that you are in this country and where are you from. That always comes up, isn't it? And I wasn't expecting to be asked that question quite so many times having worked in the arts for a while now. So yeah, it was quite an eye-opener for me. But I wanted to go back, Nikita, to what you were talking about earlier, and you were talking about the creative communities that have always been here, and how it is that this conversation can kind of shine a light on that, or balance things in a way. Because I completely understand you know, where you're coming from, and there are certain aspects of communities that I've been part of, and I can see how they would, you know, the Arts Council England or an artist or an institution might look to them and think they are creative people, they're cultural producers, but to them it's just part of their life, right? It's just who they are, it's just the way they live. So how do we balance that and kind of instill that idea of creativity in these communities that are already in existence?
I think there are two things that I'm definitely considering, because there are two halves to it for me. The first is personal responsibility, and then the cultural responsibility. So for me, the personal responsibility is, you know, I come from a Caribbean background, and I engage in carnival each year. And I know that my carnival troupe, which is made up of family members, are incredibly creative and resourceful, and are natural project managers and producers, and all of the things that Arts Council should be funding. They don't have the cultural capital, and they haven't learnt the language that Arts Council demand that we speak in order to be able to access those funds. So, as a personal responsibility, helping to support different aspects of my lived experience or hobbies, or things that I do at home, um, bringing a little bit of what I've learned. Because if I have had to go through all of this trauma, then at least that labor should be, shared with those who can benefit most.
Yeah.
The second, which I said was cultural responsibility, for me, not everyone might agree on this, but I definitely feel strongly about it for various reasons, is that those who are in charge, those who have the power within institutions or within organizations or charities or whatever it may be, they cannot continue to hold those roles um, without acknowledging that they have no interest in anyone's life but their own in this day and age, with that amount of access to having different types of friendships and relationships. Not in this industry, not in this one, it boggles the mind that you can be a director per se, or head of exhibitions, but you don't have any other friends that aren't white, or you don't go to carnival, or you don't go to the Mela, or you don't, it's Rosh Hashanah this past 2 days, and um, I've not seen not any cultural references to the Jewish New Year. And it's as simple as knowing that there are people within your organization that celebrate and enjoy different things, and you don't know them. And that to me is heartbreaking, to be fair.
Yeah. I think I would endorse that view, and I feel that people who sit at the top of these institutions should educate themselves by attending different festivals or festivities or events. And I think what happens is when somebody like you and I are recruited into an institution, the white senior people would look to us, or people with a limited cultural knowledge would look to us and ask us to tell them everything that there is to know, and we only know one small bit, right, that's unique to us, because there's so much diversity within our communities as well. So there is a sense of because when I've been asked to talk about South Indian culture, and I'm quite happy to do that, but it's my experience and it's my family's experience, and it could be something completely different to the next South Indian family's experience, so it's not universal. And so it would be nice to see directors moving in everyday circles, rather than the swishy parties all the time.
It's just bizarre. It's bizarre that it's no different to an artist or a creative that is flown into somewhere to place make, as if the place didn't exist before they got there, and the people didn't exist before they got there. And I think that's no different to a curator that kind of plops into a gallery and then shimmies on out back to the sticks and doesn't have any yeah, any relationship. I remember being asked once if I knew of any good Nigerian restaurants, and I was like, I'm from Barbados. I do, because I do go outside of my bubble to try different things. I really like injera, by the way. I'll write down some good places to get some good injera in the
I like injera as well, actually. Yeah, I remember being because I'm Indian, I must know every part of India like the back of my hand. And so I remember being asked, where are the good hotels in Jaipur? I'm like, let me ring up a travel is it's humorous, but at the same time we're laughing about it now. But this is the problem, and we're laughing about it because it recurs so often, doesn't it? It's not just a one-off, and I know lots of people in the audience will be sitting there agreeing, thinking, yeah, we don't speak for the whole of our people because we're so diverse. So I think we've got 5 minutes before we head for the break. Sunshine, can I just ask, do you want to take some questions at this stage, or how do you want to do it?
Yeah, I think it would be nice to keep, sorry, that's something I should have mentioned in housekeeping, shouldn't I? But maybe we can keep the questions for the end, and just to not interrupt the flow of your conversation. But we do have a few more minutes before we break. We'll break probably just before 10 to, between 1:45 and 10 to. So you still have like a few minutes left. But yeah, I absolutely stand behind that whole idea of like this sort of strange burden of representing like a whole group of people all the time. Yeah, and being asked for recommendations for restaurants, that's a big one.
But you know what's really funny? Nobody ever asks me for recommendations for restaurants when they want to invite me to that restaurant. They want me
True.
to give them the golden knowledge so that they can impress the ethnically diverse person that they have flown in. And I feel that at the very least, as a colleague of mine, why have you not asked me for dinner?
Yeah.
Because
Or
food is where you connect with people so much,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
It's
definitely, yes. It's a huge topic, isn't it? Food. But yes, and the there is always that indicator that people refer to, isn't there? Oh, well, if you see loads of Indian people in there, then it must be a good Indian restaurant. It might just be local, you know what I mean? Not well, having said that, I can speak from my family's point of view. We wouldn't go to a local Indian restaurant because my mum's a really good cook. But yeah, it might be something to do with the proximity of the place, right? And convenience, I guess. But I wonder if anybody's ever asked people that they know for recommendations for a really good English restaurant. I don't know. I feel like there might be plenty in Yorkshire. But weirdly, I think they'd be referred to as traditional Yorkshire food rather than English food.
I think I have always, to anyone who might have come from somewhere else that doesn't have a Weatherspoons, recommended having a Weatherspoons like hangover breakfast or Harvery, because there was one time where I got really upset because I'd never had an English, like, I'd never had an English roast. And everyone I spoke to in the workplace was like, how could you not? And I was like, because my mum doesn't cook English food.
Yeah.
That's not apparent. We don't all just know. We're not born with this knowledge of how to make a Yorkshire pudding and a shepherd's pie. It's something that is like within someone's culture that is passed down and is like a really nice home cooked food. And then when you have it at a restaurant, It makes you feel like you swallowed a hug. And that's what I wanted. I wanted the Yorkshire pudding hug, right? And for me at home, that on a Saturday is an oxtail soup. Oh, look, see, Sunshine just got a hug.
Right.
It is that time of night though. My son's going to bed.
Rudy's just put that it's mostly curries in Yorkshire, and Remy's just commenting on the goodness gracious me sketch. Yes, I can speak from my own experience of the Yorkshire pudding, that it's a complete misnomer, and at no point should it be referred to as a pudding, because it's not sweet and you can't put custard on it. So it's just the blandest thing in the universe. Anyway, I think that's a good point to take a break.
Yes, that would be a good point. I really want to kind of, maybe one of the things that I thought we could maybe start the next session with, this is just more for myself than, but as much for myself as it is for everyone else. I really liked your question, Uthra, about how do we instill this idea of creativity in existing communities. So it seems like there's this thing happening where like organizations, arts organizations and commissioners are talking about cultural producers on the one hand and kind of creating this out of like, because they don't exist. And then there's this idea that these communities already exist and already have creativity with them, but that's not like really in the forefront of what they're doing, like what Nikita was mentioning earlier about the carnival. They don't think of themselves as like, I'm a production manager of the carnival, they're just doing it.
No, and I wonder if it's about actually having people from Arts Council England to talk about what they offer in terms of funding to a broader range of organised, let them do the legwork. Do you know what I mean? Because it's always the institutions and the people in the know who seem to apply for pots of funding. But actually, if Arts Council England want to create this amazing cultural country, why don't they deploy spokespeople on their behalf to say, we are the biggest funding body in the UK. We can help you, and start the rebalancing from within. It's like, you know, do what it says on the tin.
Maybe that's something we can start the next part with. Yeah, I'm gonna try and remember that. And Nikita and Uthra, you can also help me, because I'm not, I can very quickly forget things like that. But yeah, let's go for a quick 10-minute break. We'll be back shortly before 8 o'clock. Remind me again, Uthra, what we were talking about right before the break. It was you had this great.
It was to do with the Arts Council England, and whether actually thinking about it, it could be they themselves as a body, as an organization, could do more to promote what they do to these pockets of everyday communities, rather than these institutions who seem to be all in the know and have this kind of, you know, elite access, because they've got the grant writers, they know exactly what to put in the application, they know what's going to win the bid. And I wonder if it's a case of kind of, you know, getting more people out from the organization onto the streets, really. You know, because like Nikita was saying, somebody who organizes a carnival, or somebody who organizes a festival, you know, in our respective areas, they don't think of themselves as directors, or they just, you know, they're just doing it because they want to, and there's a need. And it's about having a great time as well, and celebrating what is the essence of us, of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of goes back to that idea of access that we talked about in our chat leading up to this webinar, where and Nikita talked about this quite well earlier in the conversation, this demand of knowing a particular language, where it's it just sort of funnels it all into this bottleneck of you have to know the right language and yeah, so that already kind of eliminates a huge swath of
Yeah. And I
cultural
think
producers.
I think also in job applications they perpetuate that, because there's a certain way to answer questions in a job application about your experience, and then when it comes to the interview, can you tell me an example of how you've streamlined a problem? It's like, well, I don't know. You know, and the most banal thing comes to mind anyway.
Yeah, I'm only pointing my finger in the air because that reminds me that Nikita has this wonderful short film that she has put together. Maybe Nikita, you can introduce a context of how this film came about, and then I'll play it. It's only 6 minutes long. So maybe Nikita, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, just before I do, to also respond to you both about that, you know, what the Arts Council can do to spread that knowledge or share it even. I also believe that there can be an opportunity within other kinds of industries. For example, like a family member of mine works at the BBC and was so nervous about the kind of responding to a particular question on the application process. And it's like, there are 45 people in our carnival troupe, and you get them from here to Leeds and London on the same day, and also internationally, and also in Europe at their carnivals. Why have you not talked about that in any part of your experience of project management? Any you know, I don't know any better example, but it's like she felt she couldn't put herself into her application. And isn't that an interesting thing, that all of these things that make you the perfect candidate are the things that make you, the things that you do in your everyday life? And if you can't use your everyday life as a perfect example of how you streamline something, I don't even know what that means, Uthra, but yeah, you know, there's opportunity in every conversation to find examples of your own brilliance, not the brilliance that is demanded of you, I think. And on that note, I'm going to read, because I didn't mention this at the beginning because I always have trouble mentioning it. But I am neurodiverse, and so sometimes I start to freeze because I feel sensory overload. So I'm going to read just to make it easier on me and other people who might be distracted by my nervousness. So, hello, my name is Nikita Gill. The film you're about to watch features a black and white video of me sitting at my kitchen table in my house. The video shows me using my hands to carve and reshape a person's specification for a job. This video will include me writing bullet points and speaking some of the most common words in the English language that are repeatedly used in person specifications for jobs in the culture sector. These words are loaded. They create an invisible barrier, often causing anxiety in the process of applying for something that you know you are capable of doing. I speak words in this film, and I hope that you take a few moments to consider them. Thank you, Nikita.
Thank you, Nikita. I'm going to share this, my screen. I hope there's a way of doing this. There we go. Everybody, can you see Max, who is, yeah, so we got a thumbs up from Nikita. Okay, so that's important because Max will be signing for our deaf publics. So this is Nikita's film.
Hey, I'm just going to jump in and say there's no sound.
Thank you. There isn't anything said at the moment.
Manage, support, assist, respond to, essential, desirable, responsible, responsibility, flexible, experience, qualification, knowledge, duty, excellence, 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 exceptionalism, act, represent, manage, support, assist, respond to, essential, desirable, responsible, responsibility, flexible, experience, qualification, knowledge, duty, excellence, 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 exceptionalism, act, represent, manage, support, assist, respond to, essential, desirable, responsible, responsibility, flexible, experience, qualification, knowledge, duty, excellence, 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 exceptionalism, we must prove that we are in service. We must prove that we are in service. Act, represent. Where is the care for us? Manage in this service. Support to others. Assist. Where are the safeguards? Essential. Where is the mental health support? Responsible. Where is the commitment to care? flexible? Where is the commitment to instituting care? Knowledge. Where is the acknowledgement excellence of institutional position on care? Excellence. What is the purpose of this role? Exceptionalism.
Oops. Thank you so much for sharing that, Nikita. That was extraordinary. Yeah. There was a particular question in there that I would like to maybe just throw out to you and Uthra to maybe talk around a little bit, because that was also kind of central to our conversation last week, which was the instituting of care. Maybe we can begin with that. And then you can also tie in some of the things that you were you were trying to work through in the video, amongst all the other threads that we've kind of got in this conversation so far. So yeah, instituting care. Thank you.
Well, I think the film highlights all the key words that organizations are looking for, but in my experience, the reality is that those key words are sometimes paid lip service to, because what happens is that being flexible and prioritizing your workload means, in my experience, shut up and do as you're told and toe the line. And if there's something that you disagree with, then yeah, you can talk about it, but don't expect to be any changes this side of this century. Honestly, that's how it feels. And so when it comes to care and what an institution says about caring for people and being responsible for care, they need to have a much more critical engagement within their own internal organizations before they start talking about these great manifestos, which sound great. You know, who doesn't want to work for an institution that is all caring, right? Of course you do. But what's the reality of that? And when you're not being heard fairly, and when your points are not put across, or you're not given an opportunity to put your points across in a way that represents what you want to achieve and what you want to do, and you know that you're being shut down, where's the care in that? So that's my experience of what institutional care has felt like. I on the other hand, I have been in organizations where institutional care has involved a really open conversation, and that has started, and it's been very noticeable from the point of the interview, actually, and it's felt like a conversation rather than a cross-examination or an interrogation, which is what sometimes interviews can feel like, because you're nervous, right? And you don't, the way the questions are posed in an interview aren't the everyday questions that you would receive that you would hear in conversation. So in terms of institutional care, it would be nice to see how the interview process and the selection process, I think Remy put in the chat box, plain English, and it's about speaking to people in this plain English and not in this corporate jargon. Nikita?
Yes, 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 and yes. I agree with everything that you said. I think that in thinking about the last three things that I say, which is, where is the commitment to instituting care? Where is the acknowledgement of institutional position on care? And what is the purpose of this role? Are three things that I hope people will be confident to think through as they apply for a job or as they go into an interview. Because when you do go in, you're kind of already, as you said, it's an interrogation. An interrogation means that someone already holds the power and it's not you if you're having to defend your position. And actually, you know, by the very nature of you being in that room, that institution needs you. So that interrogation is to find out how they can best use you.
Yeah. And when it comes to that point where they say, have you got any questions? You're just exhausted. You think, oh my God, no, I don't have any questions. And then you worry about not having a question.
But here is the question that I would like people in this conversation to share with others too. If in an interview you're asked, do you have any questions of us? I would love for people to respond with, yes, I do have a question. What is in your care package? What are the benefits of your care package in this institution? Because I'm hoping to make an investment of my time in this place that I respect and I love and I want to work for to help make better. But I need to know whether you have policies in place that will help me to do that job well. You know, there's not enough institutions that are transparent about what they can offer you beyond a staff discount. And a staff discount isn't going to wipe my tears at night, you know?
Yeah.
But knowing that I can trust that institution, knowing that I can trust that institution to have my back in situations where there might be some kind of violence towards me that might not be physical. That's something that would make me think, yeah, I want to work here, you know?
Yeah, and to feel like you're being properly heard. And it's not, as I think I've said before, it's not just something that people pay lip service to. It's actually actioned, or it's taken to a point where you feel like there is some remedy or some solution.
Yeah.
So we've identified some of the thorny problems. So what are the solutions, and how, apart from throwing out this question at the end of an interview, if we're lucky enough to get to the interview stage, and we've all been in situations, haven't we, where we haven't even had a reply to a job application, and then you get excited when you do get a reply, only to see that it's a rejection, and then when it actually turns out to be a shortlisted thing for an interview, you think, oh my God, I can't believe it. So we get very excited. So now that we've identified the problems, how can we structure this conversation and this discussion to identify key solutions to alleviating those problems?
For me, something I am currently in the process of researching is the correlation between what we research in medical terms and what we research in a creative terms. So a few years ago, there was this report about the effect of going to an art gallery on mental health. And I always sort of thought, but actually working in one really damages your mental health. you know, the how, the why, the what, I started to look at the medical end of research, and I found out about decision making capacity, which is a term that's used most closely in relation to people um, who might have been drug dependent, for example. And it just basically means the ability for them to understand the benefits and risks, and also the alternatives to the treatment that they're having. And I feel like that's what people coming into this industry need. They need to know the benefits and risks of working in that particular institute. Is there an anti-racist policy? Is there a group that you can go to discuss some things that might be happening that are harming you? Do they have a care package or policy? Do they have an open door policy on situations where you may feel vulnerable because there is, say, for example, an exhibition that contains nudity, and there might be some visitors who take advantage of that to say things that shouldn't be said to you? Is there training for the staff who have to stay in that room because the insurance values mean that they have to stay in that room, but it doesn't necessarily mean they can then run from a situation like that? No? So decision making capacity being employed in the cultural industries that we're in, and finding out the different ways that we can do that. I've tried it out with my mission, vision, and values, because I got taught at uni that every institution has a mission, a vision, and values, and they'll always be visible on the website, like on the about page. And then it made me think, well, what about mine? Do I have any? Because if I don't know what mine are, how can I possibly align myself with an institution's? And how can I even unpack what they're saying as being on it? You know, I mean, I don't know whether it's just because I've been brought up naturally critical, but you know, let's take the Whitworth for the perpetual gratification of the people of Manchester. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
Mm.
So maybe we can hear from our audience, because I think we've been receiving some great comments in the chat box. So Sunshine, what's the protocol? Do people just turn on their mics and ask their questions and turn on their cameras if they feel comfortable?
If they would prefer to do that, that's fine. But I think just for being streamlining's sake and just the ease of it, there's some that's already in the chat that maybe you and I can read out, or Nikita. Uthra, is there a particular one that you want to, because you're saying there's some interesting comments, I'll let you pick the one that the questions or comments out that are resonating with you.
Well, there's quite a lot. So I have to go back to the beginning. Speak amongst yourselves.
Or even for Nikita. Yeah.
Hang on.
Oh, here we go. So are you choosing one, Uthra?
No, you go ahead. I'm still reading.
Okay.
I'm happy to maybe point one or two out that I like. But,
okay.
You.
Yeah. Just the most recent ones, actually, from Hattie, and they had mentioned this sort of the notion of merit, and what and in sort of my digestion of this notion of merit is this idea of what gets valued. So not just job applications, but just in the whole sort of framework that is the Arts Council, that is supposedly a wide net, you know, that supposedly allows a lot of people access to this to these funding opportunities. But in your video, Nikita, even though it's specifically about like art positions, I mean, it all kind of is shaped a particular way such that it implicitly inhibits the entrance of certain of people without these experiences. So like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the way it's all streamlined in these different places, despite the sort of ostensible things being ostensibly sort of open and accessible, really ultimately is constricted through, as you talked about earlier, language. And in your video, it really kind of had this whole other dimension. I had never looked at a person's spec in that way before, just really kind of abstracting it almost to the level of like, what are the words that keep cropping up over and over again? It was really, really quite, yeah, that was extraordinary. But that's not a question. It was just me kind of trying to distill that particular aspect of the chat that I thought was very interesting, this notion of merit, what gets valued, what gets kind of weeded out, even if it's unintentionally, you know, by the way the framework is structured. So that seems to be some of the things that have been hit tonight. But yeah, maybe in the meantime, that was a little bit rambly, but maybe in the meantime, Uthra and Nikita, have you seen anything there that...
Rudy's got a quote. What do you think is stopping the arts from publicizing how they make spaces and events disability friendly, not making it clear carers go for free or that they have disabled access? What do you think is stopping the arts from publicizing how they make spaces and events disability friendly? That is a great question, because it automatically speaks to the problems that are apparent for people with different abilities trying to engage and access with work that's put on public display. And honestly, Rudy, I don't know what's stopping organizations, because it's a given, right? You have to appeal to people from all abilities. You have to accommodate for people from all abilities. So it should come automatically. And I guess one of the things that I've experienced is lack of time. You know, there is a squeeze towards an install or a show, and things get mismanaged a little with things, and it's not an excuse, it's just my experience. But it's certainly something that I know Nikita and I strongly advocate for. Nikita, do you have any answer to that question?
I think that I can only answer from my perspective and my experience. I wouldn't like to kind of put a blanket over everything, but I do believe that it's because they're not disabled that they don't think about it. Because as we talked about earlier in part 1 of this conversation, it was like, well, why don't you know where there is a good Nigerian or Ethiopian restaurant? Because you don't go to them, because you don't happen to use a wheelchair. You don't realize that in Manchester Art Gallery, you can't actually access the stone stair exhibition. You know, when you go through the front doors from the Mosley Street entrance where the trams are, and you go up those stone steps all the way to the top, there is no access atrium because the steps go down into them. So you basically go round and that's it. So if you happen to use any kind of equipment that helps you to walk or to navigate space, you just can't see what's in that atrium very well or up close. And it's quite bizarre that that's not something that's discussed. But I think that it is also to do with time, as Uthra said, because there is a disease that is currently spreading throughout, or has probably been within the cultural institutions for a very long time, where outcomes, we saw it in that report, is outcome based, it's goal driven, it's fast programming, it's we went into a global pandemic and we lost family members, but we needed to program to show that we were useful. We over programmed. We continue to just pump out stuff constantly to the point of exhaustion. And then everyone this August was like, don't talk to me, I'm spending the whole of August just doing nothing. You know, I saw so many posts that were like, I'm taking August off, you know. And it's that if we have slow fashion and we have slow food to help us to think about sustaining ourselves, to have a better sustainable lifestyle, why do we not have slow programming that helps us to better sustain our minds and our health, and help us then to have to think about, oh, you know.
Definitely. And I think one of the other ingredients that gets thrown into the pot is money and budget. And I think time and budget seem to go hand in hand. And you know, that it would be, you know, we in institutions they talk about things like core funding and having to fundraise to get the remainder of the funding to launch a program or launch a specific exhibition or put an event together. And you know, when it comes to things like I don't know, BSL interpreters, or for an event, or Braille signs, or you know, information in a different language, all of those seem to get missed in a core budget, and it should be right at the top as a priority of any core budget, that these things have to be fulfilled. And in my experience, the budget it doesn't always fulfill those key criteria.
Yeah, I think it's also when you have these compartmentalizations of like writing a budget and all of these things. I think in thinking about categories, it sometimes puts those things out of view. It's not integrated, I guess is what I'm saying. You know, it's not something that's already within our thinking. And people, and that's why Harshlight, for at least for me, I mean, for Block really has been such a great thing because of I used the analogy of casting the net wide earlier, so I'm going to reuse that as again. So it's like casting it wider so that you have a wider range of practitioners coming, even in this short period of time, an hour and a half of conversation. You can learn so much and find out that there are all these other little plots and coordinates that we're missing in our vision. And then pull them in, BSL being one of these, and non-sightedness and blindness being another that we're trying to address as well in our billboard work too. Sorry, I didn't mean to pull this into the Block thing, but obviously being a worker myself in this field, it's hitting these marks for me too. So yes, go on, Nikita.
I would also just like to highlight something that Holly Grange said. Hi, Holly. I hope you're well, and I hope your baby is as well. Holly said that I'd like to see the normalizing of the process of sharing interview questions in advance. And the reason why I wanted to highlight it at this point is because for different reasons, many people might want to apply in different ways. They might want to speak their application. They might want to produce a video. I'm really audio sensory, which is why I produced this response when I was invited. And it's so important to know there are different ways that you can get the point across that you're really good at what you do. And I think by hiding it or masking it really drives home this idea that there is a hierarchy, because if you remain ignorant of some things, then you cannot have the power. The power always stays with the person who knows the most. So if you don't know what kinds of questions to answer, like you don't know how to answer the questions because you get that one on the spot of like, how did you streamline a problem, or the age old how do you handle stressful situations? Well, you should feel a confidence to know that you can say, I don't handle them well, because nobody in their right mind says, I love the stress. The adrenaline rush is amazing. Like, I'm totally taking years off my life, but doesn't matter, because that exhibition will go up. No one, right? Nobody. We all hate it. We should feel confidence to be able to say that. We should feel a confidence to be vulnerable. We should be confident to be honest about what our own limitations are, and not see them as a failure, but an opportunity for that institution to help raise and support you in that, so that you can be your best self while you're there.
I think that is a great note to end on. That we should feel confident and have the space to be able to show our limitations, to express our limitations and vulnerabilities. I mean, that is a really, really important thing. I think that is really what it comes down to when we're talking about care in institutions, that we have this, we are given a space, whether it's like an exclusive space somewhere in more private situations, or like a more public kind of platforms, but different types of spaces too. I guess that's something we didn't really discuss, but where these spaces take place informally, more formally, in smaller groups and larger groups, all of this is part of instituting care as well. But yeah, we should be confident to be able to show that. Thank you so much, Uthra and Nikita, for tonight. It's been really, really wonderful, really conversational, critical and restorative all at the same time. I hope everyone who's here tonight can take away something from this. And actually, before talking about forms and application forms and all these things, I actually have one that I was gonna give you. Oh gosh, what did I do with it? Oh, never mind. I'm just going to have to send it by email. I think I closed the document by mistake without saving it. But anyway, it's an Arts Council funding kind of thing, where you need to kind of, if we can get feedback from people, that is an important thing for them. But actually, on a more serious note, it's something that we read through really thoroughly, and it really helps us kind of think through what Harshlight is about, what our programming is about. So I'll just send an email out with a link to that. And if you have time, do fill it out for us. We would really appreciate it. But yeah, go and have a rest now. It's quite late on a Wednesday. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to everyone who persevered and stayed and joined and contributed. And Nikita, Sunshine, Max, Vicky, thank you so much. Thank you for all your support.